Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Jeff Chase, the Marketing Director of Allosource, to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker, which I know we're all anxious to get to. Allosource has been one of our largest, long-standing corporate partners, supporting the work of the Journey Forward and what we're trying to accomplish to connect people to this community. So thank you for being here, Jeff, and he's going to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy. As she said, I'm Jeff Chiesa, the Director of Marketing for Allosource. We're a not-for-profit tissue bank that supports allograft skin to the medical community for burn reconstruction. I've been involved with the Phoenix Society for about a decade, and through the years I've seen it grow and help thousands of survivors. It's really one of the highlights of my job. The partnership that Allosource has with the Phoenix Society is truly rewarding, supporting the lifelong journey from a burn injury. This is my 5th in person, and it's great to be back in person, World Burn Congress, and I'm especially honored this year to introduce our keynote speaker. Erin Volpatti is an author, cognitive performance and injury coach, speaker, Brown University graduate, and now retired NHL player, right here for the Washington Capitals. Setting a goal and visualizing his future kept him going when he burnt over 40% of his body when he was 19 years old. His journeys and successes would not have been possible without the extremely powerful visualization practice he developed. Aaron has a truly inspiring story of overcoming a tremendous amount of adversity. Today, he's dedicated to teaching others to do that also, and finding their true grit through visualization. That's difficult to say, visualization. Please welcome Erin Volpatti.
Thank you. All right. Man, is it great to be here with all of you, and great to be back in the DC area. So as you heard, I used to play hockey in DC about 10 years ago, but that's jumping way ahead. Now, before we get started, I want to share a little story with all of you. So earlier this year, my wife and I go on a date night, okay? Her parents were in town, and it was a win-win for everyone. They got to spend some time with the kids, and we got to go on the ever-important date night, right? All you married couples will know what I mean. And fast forward, later in the night, we get home, and I ask my mother-in-law, how'd the night go? And she said, yeah, it was great, but the funniest thing happened. And I said, oh yeah, what's that? And she said, well, when I went to tuck Finn, my oldest, into bed, I asked if he wanted to hear a bedtime song. Now, Finn loves music. In fact, I would say he has an above average taste and appetite for heavy metal and rock music, especially, more than the average 7-year-old. So he, of course, says, yeah, sure, Dama. And she proceeds to sing, hush, little baby, don't say a word. And apparently Finn's little head popped up off the pillow. And I can see this look so clearly in my head of what the expression on his face must have been like. And I'm sure it was one of disappointment and utter confusion. And he leans over and he goes, Dama, that's not how the song goes. And he proceeds to sing the famous Metallica song, Enter Sandman. Hush, little baby, don't say a word, and never mind that noise you heard. Does anyone know that song? Yeah. Well, for the record, Dama has absolutely zero clue who Metallica is. So now she has her own look of confusion on her face. But nonetheless, she tucks Finn into bed, and off he goes to dreamland, dreaming about becoming a drummer in the next famous rock band. He also firmly believes that he will play in the NHL and have a famous fishing show, all at the same time. And why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he believe he can become all of these things? Because a child's world is limitless, right? They have an innate ability to believe that they can become anything that they desire. We tend to lose this ability with age, our own limiting beliefs, and often through adversity or injury. I want to give you something all to chew on, not literally, as we continue on here. If your life was a movie, and you got to be the director of that movie, it could be anything you want. What would it look like? What would that movie look like? So I'm Aaron Valpatti, as you heard. I'm a cognitive performance coach, visualization expert, author, and speaker. And I'm here today to share my story with all of you. And also share how I made the same mistake that so many of us make. And that is to put governors on the dream. I let my burn injury define me and define what I thought was possible and what I was truly capable of. But I'm also going to share how I rediscovered that ability to dream through adversity, and how I built an untouchable sense of belief and grit through this visualization practice. And I inadvertently unearthed this inner power, this inner fighter, after a horrific accident when I was lit on fire. Now, I'm not talking about a ha-ha movie scene where the guy's pant leg or hat is lit on fire only to be quickly put out, right, and everyone has a good laugh. No. I'm talking about a scene out of a horror movie. A young man running through the barren woods on fire, losing a battle with a gas-induced inferno. Now, I thought I knew what pain was up until this point in my life. I had been punched in the face hundreds of times, received hundreds of stitches, broken all the bones, you name it. But as many of you know, burn injuries are some of the worst, if not the worst, levels of pain imaginable. Now, I don't remember a lot in the days following my accident. In fact, I didn't even realize I had been airlifted to Vancouver Hospital when I woke up there the next day. I was almost 20 years old, and I was playing junior hockey back in British Columbia, Canada. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with junior hockey, it's a recruitment league and a stepping stone league to the NCAA. And that was my dream. That was my NHL, was the NCAA. I put the governor on that NHL dream at a pretty young age because I wasn't really that good. I really wasn't. I played the lowest level of minor hockey growing up, got cut from all the select teams, and I snuck my way into junior hockey as a fighter. Now again, for those of you who aren't familiar with hockey, fighting is a part of the game. And I was pretty good at it. And that's how I made it to that junior hockey league. So again, I identified that, the NCAA, as my pinnacle, my dream, I figured Division I, Division III, I didn't care. I thought if I can go play hockey for an extra 4 years, get an education, that'd be pretty damn sweet. And I was also that guy. Like many of us at that age, I thought I was invincible and untouchable. I was always doing stupid shit for adrenaline, attention. I was feeding a young ego and living up to that fighter stereotype and what I thought that should look like. And with that said, I was also a pyro. And on the night of this accident, I had nearly 2 liters of gas spill on me in a stunt gone horribly wrong. Now, my first real concrete memory in that burn unit was the morning of day 3. And I had just come out of my first debridement procedure, which many of us are familiar with here. I mean, it could be redefined as torture, right? And I come out of that anesthetic, and I'm laying in my bed, and the doctor walks in the room. And he's going to relay my prognosis, right? Because up until this point, we didn't really know how bad it was or how burnt I was, right? We knew it was bad. I was in Vancouver, and at the time there were 10 beds in the burn unit. This is almost 20 years ago. So the 10 worst burns in the province. My parents didn't even know, like, if I was going to make it at this point, right? And so he walks in the room, and the first thing he does is he looks at my parents and says, "It's okay, your son is not going to die. He's going to be okay. He's very lucky. Someone was definitely looking out for him. It doesn't look like his face is going to be permanently scarred, and I don't think we're going to have to graft over his joints, which is a very good thing. He will make a full recovery, but it's going to be a very long road for him, and he's going to be in here for a long time." He's 40% second, third-degree burns, and there's significant damage to his torso, legs, right arm, and hand. In fact, at the time, they were even talking about potential bone grafts for my arm and hand. And thankfully, on the way to that hospital, I had my arms in a cooler in the car, which ended up saving my right arm and hand. And he said, the foreseeable future, we're going to focus on rest, pain management, and we'll look to get his skin grafts done hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks here. Now, I think while my parents took some solace in the fact that I was going to be okay and make a full recovery, all I thought about in that moment was, I have camp. Again, I'm naive, I'm not even 20. I have training camp in 3.5 months with my junior team. And I'm going into my last year of junior hockey eligibility. You can't play junior hockey past the age of 21. So this is my last crack at the can to get this scholarship. I had yet to even talk to one NCAA scout. They weren't exactly recruiting fighters to the NCAA. You're not allowed to fight, right? But I figured, if I can just add a couple layers to my game, improve on the skill front, that again, I could get a scholarship somewhere. So to paint the picture for you, I'm sure no one's ever asked the doctor that question in that setting. I'm fully wrapped head to toe like a mummy, right? I have little eye slits, my nose an oxygen piece, and my mouth is slightly exposed. And I asked the doctor, what does this look like? I have training camp. And I will never, ever forget the look on his face till the day I die, and he just froze. And that's when I knew it was over. And he eventually laid that gavel down and he says, listen, these recoveries can take years, not months. You're lucky to be alive. This could have been a lot worse. Maybe in a couple of years, we'll get you in a pair of skates in a non-competitive environment, but you're going to be camped out here for quite a while. Let's just focus and take it a day at a time. And so that was it. In that moment, I kissed that dream goodbye, right? These people had seen countless burn injuries before me, and I figured that was the way it had to be. So that was really my first 2 weeks in that burn unit. I was trying to balance these different emotions. I mean, on one hand, I was in a ton of pain, obviously, right? But on one hand, I was down and depressed about what my life was supposed to look like now, not as a hockey player, and the fact that I wouldn't be able to go chase that dream. But on the other hand, I was very grateful that I would make a full recovery and live a normal life after that recovery, right? So something obviously changed, right? And that moment came about 2 weeks into my stay, and I get a call from my junior hockey coach. And my parents, again, I'm totally bedridden still. My parents put the phone between my ear and my shoulder, and I have this conversation. And he says, you know, how you holding up? And I said, well, you know, been better. And he said, listen, I was just talking with one of the coaches from Brown University, and they're after a specific type of player. Now, his exact words were, we need a guy to put the fear of God in the defensemen of the Ivy League. No, that was kind of what I did. So he says, I have the perfect guy for you. There's just one major problem. He's laid up in the burn unit, and the future doesn't look good. So he said, they want to talk to you. I know you get the time. Give him a call. So we take a chance. My parents take down the number, and we call this coach from Brown University. And it was left really open-ended. You know, they said, we're sorry to hear what happened. We wish you the best in recovery. And almost as a formality, maybe we'll get to see you play one day down the road. Both of us knowing that that wasn't on the table anymore. I remember my parents hanging up that phone and getting very emotional with them in that room, because I had worked my whole life to just talk to one of these guys. And I had finally done it. And look where I was. Look what I had done to myself. And that's when I started to ask questions. So they're telling me I can't play hockey in a few months. Why? And trust me, there was a really good long list of reasons why, right? Infection was probably number one, right? I had open second-degree burns, again, as many of you know, for probably 6 months, maybe even a bit longer. They just would not close, right? The old battle of to cover, not to cover, rip the scab off, go to burn care, and do it all over again, right? And having it under hockey gear that's been washed never is, you know, probably not recommended. But I thought, you know, well, I can deal with that if it comes my way. The skin grafts were going to be too limiting, too painful. They were going to take years to fully heal and mature. I couldn't sweat from these grafted areas, right? And if we're talking about a competitive sport and your heart rate's getting up there and you can't cool down properly, like at the time we didn't know, was that going to be 25, 30, up to 40%? Like it was still a little bit unsure, right? So there was that problem, and I had to wear the bodysuit for 2 full years, and the list just went on and on. And in my head, I basically thought, You're telling me it's going to hurt too much. Well, it can't be worse than what I've just been through these last couple weeks. Now, that was a little bit naive thinking, but that's what I thought in the moment. And I sat with that and I thought, those aren't good enough reasons for me to give up on this dream that, again, I had kissed goodbye. And I made a choice, and I think that's an important takeaway, if anything, is it always starts with a choice and the 100% commitment and promise to yourself. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself that I was going to go play hockey that fall, and I was going to go to Brown, or I would die trying. And I mean that literally, that I was willing to die before giving up on this dream. Now, I was also just coming on 20, right? So, different time in my life, but that's truly what I thought in that moment. So after that happened, people always ask me, how did you discover visualization? Well, this is how. I was bedridden in a burn unit. I couldn't move. My body was out of commission. And once I made this choice, I figured this was my only way out. Now, I had heard of visualization, but I didn't read a fancy book. I mean, that came later in my life. But I just started visualizing everything I wanted. And this practice eventually consisted of 4 things. So number 1, I knew I needed to get out of that hospital a lot sooner than they were telling me. So I started reframing my relationship with pain and more welcoming the pain as nourishment and fuel for my cells, which in a way it was, right? But really just focus on welcoming that and knowing it was just getting me one step closer to getting out of that hospital. And I mean, I literally would visualize healing at a cellular level and imagine my 3rd-degree areas shrinking and healing and getting stronger. And number 2, I would visualize myself walking out the doors of that Vancouver General Hospital, feeling the wind on my face, going on this journey, this comeback of a lifetime. Again, knowing I was one step closer to the 3rd thing, which was my season opener with my junior hockey team, being around my teammates for the first time after that emotional night of the accident. Right? Putting on my gear, feeling and seeing my burns, knowing they were just not just a part of me, but the fact that they made me that much stronger. Hitting the ice for the first time, hearing the crowd. And number 4, my guiding star was that commitment letter to Brown. And I would obsess over this every day and just imagine having the paper in front of me and holding the pen in the other. And just imagine that pen hitting the paper and seeing and feeling that signature flow on it. And this gave me such an almost indescribable, I mean, I tried to describe it in my book, but just an untouchable sense, again, of belief and trust in myself that I would overcome this and go on this journey. I was almost, in a sense, able to transport myself out of my current physical reality into this other reality where I could be anything I wanted. And that starts to spill over, and it did spill over and guide me in that comeback. So I got out of that hospital in 6 weeks, which was way sooner than they were telling me, and eventually played in the season opener and committed to Brown just a couple months after that season opener. Now I'm skipping over a very large part of the story and the journey and the hell that summer and that really next year was. But I had this mindset, but remember, the body is the governor. Right? And my body was begging me to stop. Right? And I had all these complications that year. To list off a few, I actually had kidney stones the day after I got released from Vancouver General Hospital, and I was back in the same hospital about 5 hours east where the night of the accident happened. The same hospital I ran into, ass naked. There was nothing left of my clothes after this. Screaming, filthy, charred, right? The same hospital I ran into that night. I couldn't walk for another, about 6 weeks into that summer. And here I am, trying to come back and play hockey. But if I was upright for too long, the blood would rush through to my skin grafts on my legs and they would just slowly bleed. So part of my rehab, so I shouldn't say I couldn't walk, totally not walk, but part of my rehab was to just go for very short walks multiple times a day, right? And they more just looked like this. And as soon as I would notice the blood on my tensor bandages, I knew it was time to go home, go around on my arms and get my legs up and go through the burn care routine, right? I had an emergency appendectomy 10 days before that home opener that year. Again, my body was just saying, hey, we're trying to heal from a major surgery, and here you are not just going through rehab, like I was trying to train and skate. I could barely even move, let alone skate, right? And so they actually had to, when I had this complication and my body begging me to stop, they had to cut through my skin graft to get the appendix. I was coming to the rink and leaving on crutches. Again, I could barely walk, let alone compete in competitive hockey. So I had every reason to quit. I really did. And there were times every single day where I wanted to give up and give in, because that would have been a lot easier. And I think every day, what if I did? What if I would have given in? My life would look a lot different. Now, this is an interesting audience because I'm not necessarily advocating for anyone to defy doctor's orders, right? But more, be careful and don't let anyone tell you what's possible and tell you what you're capable of. So I go to Brown. And the doctors were right, by the way. It did take 2 years to fully heal, and it was almost, for me, like that. When that suit came off, I looked different, but I felt almost like my pre-fire self. I felt good. And again, as many of you will resonate with, when you go through a traumatic experience like this, your perspective on life changes, right? And when I went to Brown, I had done it. I had reached the pinnacle, my NHL. I didn't have the wherewithal to think, hey, if I can do that, what else can I do? No, I just went and I had a blast. I lived up the US college experience, and away from the rink, I just had fun. I worked my ass off, don't get me wrong, but again, I just, for the most part, soaked up the experience. And I was taking pre-med and figured I'd go be a doctor or stay involved in sports science to some degree. Never pro hockey. And I had my second epiphany or fork in the road or whatever you want to call it after my junior year at Brown. So I'm 24 years old now. And my coach pulls me aside after our season and he talks to me and says, hey, you ever thought about playing pro hockey? I laughed in his face and I was like, no, I've literally never thought about it. And he said, I really think if you worked on your game and some of the skill stuff, I've never seen anyone hit the way you can hit. I know you can skate. I know you can fight from your time in junior. I really think you could have a solid 5-10 year career in the AHL, which is the league right below the NHL. And who knows, maybe even get a shot in the show one day. You never know. I didn't really know what to say other than, well, thank you. And I went home that night and naturally thought more about what he had said. And then it clicked. I thought, like if I can do that, come back from that burn injury to play hockey again in such a short time, why can't I go play in the NHL? I mean, that seems easier than what I had done here. And so I had a little talk with myself, and I have a lot of these talks. And I remember at the end asking myself that question, do you want to play in the NHL? And I remember opening my eyes and just saying, hell yeah, let's do it. And so again, it all started with the choice. And once I made this choice, I had to go back to what did I know got me out of that burn unit? And it was this. It was that visualization practice, which, by the way, I had totally abandoned my first 3 years at Brown, because again, I didn't have the wherewithal to think what was next. I had done it. I just went out and had fun, right? So I went back to this practice, and this is really when I got the idea of the technique I teach now in my visualization consulting business, and that is cinematic mind mapping, where I literally thought about this journey in my life as a movie, and I got to direct that movie. So now I would start it with that journey from the burn unit, and I would relive that in my head and relive that superpower that gave me, because it truly did give me a superpower. And I knew if I could do that I could do anything I wanted. And then I would imagine my senior year at Brown, dominating every aspect on the ice, executing every little play on the ice. I probably played 10 seasons in my head before the season had actually started, right? And imagine that confidence just snowballing and growing, and again, knowing I was one step closer to the NHL. And now the ending of this movie, my guiding star was the NHL contract. And walking out that tunnel to an NHL arena, stepping on the ice in front of 20,000 fans, and kind of relive this full circle moment where I was a long shot to make the NHL, even aside from this burn, right? And just live that comeback story, that long shot theme that this movie really was for me. And that brought such a tremendous amount, again, of joy and belief and trust in myself that this would come true, this movie would come true. But there's another part to the visualization practice, right? The reality is, yes, it will give you all these things that I'm talking about, confidence, belief, and trust in yourself. But the reality is, this isn't a sit on your ass and visualize your movie until it comes true, right? And so that's the other big piece of this, is it drives obsession and drives the non-negotiables in your daily choices and habits. And for me, that vision was so strong, I became so obsessed, and everything I did was aligning with that vision. I mean, I literally lived at the arena that summer. I mean, I would sleep there often, work out 3 times a day, work on my skills for hours a day, watch video, visualize for hours a day. And again, I lived in this other reality. And I was able to transport myself there. And I had lived that every day until it had actually happened. And in 6 months, I went from no one in the NHL knowing who I was to everyone knowing who I was. And I had more points my senior year than my first 3 years combined. And pair that with, the aggressive style that I had never lost, that was a pretty rare commodity back then. And I basically had my pick at about 10 teams after that year. And naturally, after I saw my contract, I called my parents. who I'm very close with, and again, they were there with me throughout, my whole life, but even especially in that recovery from my burn. Now, they knew I was having a good year, obviously. They watched a lot of the games online, and they knew that I was maybe going to give the pro hockey thing a try for a year or two to say I did it. So I called them and said, hey, Mom, Dad, you know how I told you I've been talking to some pro scouts? And they said, yeah. I said, well, by pro, I meant the NHL. And there was a stretch of silence, and my dad finally responds, and he goes, fuck off. I said, Dad, I'm serious. I just signed with the Vancouver Canucks for 2 years. So of all the teams I signed with Vancouver, my home province team, I was a free agent. I could have signed in New York, Boston, LA, Nashville, Montreal, but no, I signed with Vancouver. So, I understand his, being skeptical, because it did sound too good to be true. And again, he repeated himself this time and said, fuck off, what do you really want to tell us? Like, get real. And I'm like, I'm not joking. I'm gonna go to Winnipeg in 2 days and get my feet wet with the minor league team. And I said, I did it, I'm gonna play in the NHL. And he said, holy shit, you're not kidding, are you? And I said, no. So that was kind of a funny ending where my parents didn't believe me, because this literally, it came out of nowhere for everyone except me. Again, I had lived it my whole life. So I ended up moving to Vancouver that summer to train with the team, and coincidentally, I found a great place to rent just a couple blocks away from the Vancouver General Hospital. And I would go there once a week, and I would go up to the burn unit and visit and talk. And I would go to the main entrance of those doors, and I would just walk in and out of those doors a handful of times and just relive this whole full circle moment where just 5 years prior to that, I was laid up in that burn unit with not even an inkling of pro hockey in my mind. I'd given up the dream at one point to just try and go play in the NCAA, right? And now here I was just 5 years later as a member of the Vancouver Canucks in the best league in the world, and it was just almost surreal to me, and I just thought, like, had I been manifesting this my whole life and I didn't even know it at the time? So I went on to have a 5.5-year career in the NHL, which unfortunately got cut short due to a career-ending neck injury. And life after hockey, it hit me even harder. I was dealing with the chronic pain and stiffness of this injury. That loss of identity was very real for me. I was a hockey player for 30 years. And it just ended like that. And that rug got pulled right out from under me. And I was lost. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life or who I was anymore. I was going through a divorce at the same time. My dad got diagnosed with ALS, all in a very short window from my retirement. And I hit rock bottom. I really did. Those walls just came crumbling down around me. I remember sitting it's a small town called Vernon where I played junior hockey in British Columbia, ended up working in a job that, I didn't love at the end of the day, but I had to do something. And I just remember thinking, when I was in this rock bottom moment, like, how the hell did I get here? 2 years prior to this, I was playing in the NHL and living out this dream. Like how did it come to this? And sometimes we all need help, right? And it was in these rock bottom moments that I realized I needed to talk to someone, and I needed to unpack everything that was happening in my life and rebuild these walls around me and rebuild my life, which by the way, was not an easy thing for me to do. As a man, especially a man in hockey, we're not taught to be vulnerable and show any type of weakness, right? It was very difficult, but I'm so thankful that I did, because it was in these sessions that I came to a powerful realization, and that is that there are different types of adversity, or even pillars to mental health, right? There's a physical component, and I was really good at overcoming physical adversity. If you put a wall in front of me, and there's something I want on the other side of that wall, I will break through that to get what I want. Make no mistake. I was an NHL fighter. I was tough on the outside. But again, after these sessions, I came to the realization that there are also emotional and spiritual types of adversity, right? Which I think many of you would resonate with through this, your own, burn injuries and the recovery that, associates with that. And for me, in that sense, inside, I was just a young, immature little boy, and I didn't know how to deal with this type of adversity post-hockey. Again, for me. So I knew at this time that it was time to write a new movie for my life. Direct a new movie, not as Aaron Volpatti, the hockey player, right? The new Aaron Volpatti. What did it look like? What did I want? And again, I had abandoned this practice after I retired. And I've never, ever, and will never make that same mistake again. And I practice this every day. And as soon as I started to weave in that emotional and spiritual element, my life changed dramatically again. So I've learned two important things in my life so far. Number one, our mind is the single greatest resource that we possess as human beings. For good, but also for bad. Now, you've heard some of the good, but after hockey, I got pulled so far down that bad that it seemed almost impossible to climb out of that hole. Because we're wired this way. We like the negativity, right? We almost become emotionally and chemically addicted to that negative response and those pathways we fire in our brain. We're wired to think about what could go wrong, what could hurt us, fear of failure, past mistakes, protecting our own limiting beliefs, right? But we can cut those roots off and grow new roots of belief, empowerment, right? All these things that we want. And through this, I was able to rebuild and create a new life, not as a hockey player. Number two, adversity. Man, I love that word, adversity. Who here in this room has experienced adversity so far in their lives? Come on, I would think, everyone, right? And not relative to me or your neighbor, to you. Every piece of greatness or success I've achieved, both professionally and personally, has always been preceded by extreme adversity. And I know now that that's no accident. Now, it won't seem like it in the moment when you're in the shit, right? But I promise, if you can give it that space and reframe the idea of struggle, because we all must struggle, and nothing great was ever achieved without struggle. And it can be a beautiful struggle. that you can look back one day and be thankful for those times. I like to use the analogy of Google Maps, okay? Hear me out. You type in your destination into Google Maps, and you hit start, and you go on your journey, right? What happens when you inevitably miss a turn or make a wrong turn? Aside from maybe getting in a fight with your spouse, at least in my case. What happens, though? It recalculates or recalibrates, right? It's not a matter of if you get there, it's when you get there. There's never one path. There's never a right path. There's only your path. And it's in these wrong turns that you build the necessary grit to get to the destination. And you will need a lot of it, because it won't be easy. Right? If it were, everyone would do it. And visualization and igniting this ability to dream will help guide you in those wrong turns. And there will also be signs along the way on your journey. Look and listen for these signs. Sometimes they'll be obvious, sometimes subtle. But when you notice them, jump. Take action. Don't ignore these signs. You will regret it. It might not always be a step forward. Maybe it's a step sideways. But it won't be a step backward. It'll be a step somewhere on a new path, a new turn, on your journey. So visualization, for me, has not only gotten me out of that burn unit to come back and play hockey when I was told that that wasn't possible, got me to Brown, and later propelled me to the NHL. Most importantly, it also saved my life in a dark time after hockey. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking to all of you and doing what I do now. I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for all those wrong turns that I've made and my path. I wouldn't have the family I have today without any of that. Who are here, by the way? I see my guy Finn. I'm not sure where my wife is, somewhere. There she is back there. I wouldn't have them without any of these wrong turns in my path. It's never too late to start dreaming again. It's one of our greatest gifts. Are you a long shot? Perfect. Does it seem almost impossible? Great. Are you a burn survivor? Are you a burn survivor? Even better. So I ask you again, if your life was a movie and you get to be the director, your own comeback story, you get a say. And I have a very strong feeling that for everyone in here today, that movie could be pretty fucking awesome. Thank you.